All right, says we're live. Hey everybody, Silverback here, and welcome to the show. Tonight we're talking bananas with Mr. Larry Zanoff from ISS and Hollywood Weapons. Tonight's show is brought to you by Black Swan Tactical. You can go over there to blackswantactical.com, and anything you buy, you can use code Silverback for a 10% discount, and all the proceeds go to help John Crump's niece fight her childhood brain cancer. So it's for a good cause. So, head on over to Black Swan Tactical. I know a bunch of you probably already seen my video. So if you get a chance, head on over. There's some really cool stuff up there on the website. So, all right, well, let's get into it. So, Larry, you, first off, how'd you get into guns?
Well, first off, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate that. But how did I get into guns? Wow. So my father, may he rest in peace, was a mechanical engineer who specialized in working for like defense contracting companies. So he was always around guns. He was an active competitive shooter as well. So, 6 years old, I'm sitting at the kitchen table with him, helping him clean his guns, literally. And then at a certain point, he got hired by the Israeli Ministry of Defense. And so the whole family moved to Israel. And I grew up there from kindergarten all the way through military service, obviously dealing as well with firearms along the way. When I got discharged in the late 80s, my family had already come back to the United States, so I came back to visit them and decided to go to a gunsmithing college because guns are just, it's in the blood, as they say. So I went ahead and, graduated from college, worked at a firearms manufacturing company for a few years. Which was really cool as your first job out of college to do that. That was, it's like my dream job. And then, unfortunately, the '94 assault weapon ban in California put that company out of business. But as they say, as one door closes, another one opens. And I got this phone call from someone in the entertainment industry down in Hollywood who ran a rental armory, or they call it an entertainment armory. And of course, nobody really wants to see skeet shotguns in a movie or maybe a hunting rifle. They really want to see military grade weapons. So I had the unique situation in that I had formal schooling as a gunsmith and knew how to repair guns, work on them, and so on. But I also had real world experience with military grade firearms, because some of the great American gunsmithing colleges that are still around, they might teach you how to weld or how to engrave a firearm, but they don't teach you how to headspace a 50 caliber Browning machine gun. But I happen to have that experience. And so ever since then, I've been working as part of the entertainment world. And in general, when you answer that question, how did I get into guns? I usually put it as being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But that's the short answer. You guys just got the long answer.
Yeah, I got into guns. I used to live up in Massachusetts, and where I lived in Massachusetts, it's kind of taboo,
Really?
Yeah, we had a lot of. It was a bad area. We had a lot of gangbangers and stuff like that. So, any talk about guns, a lot of it was, it's for criminals and cops and military kind of thing. So you don't really, there's a pretty good gun culture up there from what I understand, but you really, unless you're seeking it out, you don't really find it,
That's kind of a shame because, what we call the American gun culture came from the Northeast.
Right.
But the Western Springfield Colt, all those companies originated, in that part of the country. So it's kind of sad to hear that it's not something that continues on.
Yeah. I mean, I lived in the next town over from the Smith & Wesson factory. I lived, it'd take me about 20 minutes from my house to get to the factory. So I knew about guns. I mean, I'd shot some 410 shotguns a couple times when I was a kid, but that's kind of where it stayed, movies and video games are really what got me into it, you know. And then when I moved down to the South, I live in Virginia now. So, pretty good gun culture around here. It's really easy to get into. So, you know, finally I decided after being down here, we were down here a good 10 years before I bought my first firearm. But I was like, you know what? I really want to get into it. So let's do it. And I bought one and I haven't looked back, you know. And to me, they're like, you know, you remember those potato chip commercials? You can't just have one.
Yeah, there you go. It's like a can of Pringles, right? Once you open it up, you have to have a lot of them.
Yeah, once you pop it, that's it.
You know, it actually, something that you said really kind of resonates with me. And you said, you know, guns in movies and video games piqued your interest. And isn't it amazing how video games have become such a major part of the entertainment industry? And even compared to movies, you might have watched a movie, seen a firearm in it, unless they named the firearm, you wouldn't really know what it is, you know, if you weren't a gun enthusiast. But with the advent of video games, where you have to have a drop-down menu and you have to select a specific model and everything, what that's caused is the level of education of the viewing public, and as far as their knowledge of firearms, video games have actually really helped that, you know, which I think is kind of a very interesting intersection between real life, real world, and the entertainment industry. And I think it's sparked it in a very positive way too.
Yeah, I started learning quite a bit about them, and then I would go search out what these guns were to make sure they were real. Because I know in some video games, it looks like a real gun, but they give it a different name. I don't know if it's, you know, for copyright infringement reasons or whatever.
That's usually what it is. Yeah. It's, you know, you have to pay royalties if you want to use a certain real life item in a show. Some companies will want to sponsor it. Like, hey, some Coke brand wants their drink in the show, or, you know, some vehicle like Jeep decides they want their vehicle in a game, then it's easier to deal with it because they're interested in it. But to go out and seek companies and say, hey, I want to use your, you know, whatever, your widget in this game, it's hit or miss sometimes. Some companies are into it and some companies are not.
Right. Yeah. And what really piqued my interest in the firearms world was a lot of World War II weapons. You know, I played the Call of Duty World at War, and that was all surrounded World War II. And I was just like, man, these guns are fantastic. I need to start looking into these. And then, you know, just down the rabbit hole I went.
Yeah, you know, and again, this is due to the gameplay and the kind of the backstories that they've built into, you know, all these video games. When I was a kid, a video game was the thing you went to the arcade, you know, put your coin in the machine, and this kind of one-dimensional paper figurine danced around the screen. Now there's whole backstories to all these things, and the games that are more historical, World War II games especially, I think they're just distant enough from today that they're a little bit unknown, yet they're close enough to today that a lot of the players can still identify with them. You know, can you imagine, you know, if you were playing a video game that was based, you know, in 1745, and you had to wait while your character was reloading a musket? You know, I mean, that would be very slow plodding play, not very interesting. But World War II, you know, you have automatic weaponry. It did encompass the entire world. So you had, you know, Japanese weaponry, you had Russian weaponry, you had all those. So it's very, very much an interesting. Let's see, we have an interesting comment here. 9130. Yeah, again, you know, and what this question was about was a continuity or an inaccuracy in some of the games. And, you know, a movie, a video game, it's something that's kind of grows as it gets made. Sometimes you'll see a weapon in a game, and maybe the graphic designer photographed one specific weapon because that's what was available. And then later on in some add-on package, they decide, oh, we want to have the sniper version of this available as well. But they didn't have the budget, the time, whatever, to go out and photograph and design graphically the sniper version. So you just have this scope and it just gets planted on the regular version that they already have because they're video game people. They're not necessarily, gun people. That's one of the things that the viewer demand, like that note that we just saw on the screen, the viewer demand for more and more accuracy is what pushes the games to be more and more accurate as well. When you start seeing little flubs like that in a game that you're spending $69.99 on, you're not going to go back and buy the next segment if it's not accurate. And we are, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but we are in a generation where we have a lot of veterans being, discharged from the military. They've had their hands on these weapons. They've shot them themselves. They've been shot at by these weapons. And the demand for accuracy is way, way up there, way even above what it was even like 5 or 6 years ago. So in a way, I don't like the fact that they kind of messed up that detail, but I do like the fact that the viewers are able to pick that out because it does show a higher level of education.
Yeah, it shows that there's actually gun people out there playing these games too. I mean, I play them all the time. I have fun playing them every time a Call of Duty or something like there was another game that came out with Sniper Elite, and that all spans around the World War II era. And I mean, they go as far as to make you compensate for bullet drop and all that stuff. The one really cool feature of that game I thought was the like X-ray shot. So if you hit it just right, they show the bullet shoot and then it goes in slow motion and you see it go through like the eyeball or something, right? And then they go in, they X-ray it so you can see the bullet going in and breaking apart the skull. And yeah, it's a pretty interesting game. I really like that.
It's pretty gory. So, I remember when my son, he's 26 years old now, an adult, young male, but when he was younger and he used to play video games and he'd have me help him out sometimes on them. And I thought it was like really cool. You'd have this map up in the right-hand corner and you'd see all the contestants running around. But if one of them put a suppressor on their gun, they disappeared from the map and you couldn't tell where they were at. And, it's details like that not only make the games challenging, but I think force the players to actually think. It's not just the game. It's something that, you're trying to get better at. You're putting an investment of time. You've got a learning curve. You come out of the game maybe actually learning some tactics or strategies and stuff like that. And I think that's pretty cool that as much as it's a game, it can still be educational as well.
What's up there, Walter? Mr. Safety Harbor Firearms. Good to see you out there. Let me give a shout out to some people out there. We got the Crazy Scotsman, Warsaw Patriot, Lever Guns 50, Keith Gregory, Daniel God is my judge. Hope everybody's doing good tonight. Hope you all enjoy the show. Let me give a shout out to Steve D as well. I see him out there. Joshua Brandenburg. So it's starting to fill up. We got some viewers coming in.
Thank you all for joining.
Yeah, feel free to ask some questions. I mean, that's what he's here for, for us to have a conversation and for you guys to ask plenty of questions. So, jump in when you got a chance. So being in the Hollywood industry and being such a knowledgeable gun guy, have you ever worked with any video game creators for accuracy on their weapons and stuff?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, within the last 10 years in general, but within the last maybe 4 specifically, video industry over motors as the non-money maker in the entertainment world. And you think about it for a second, you'll spend, a year and a half, let's say, and $350 million making a big budget blockbuster movie. And as long as you make the 350 million back, it's considered a success. You, of course, want to make more than that back, but if you at least break even on it, you're doing okay. A video game, you don't have to sink $350 million into it. The budgets are, they're high, but they're much lower than a motion picture. Your crew is a little bit more contained. And you're then selling it not for a $15 ticket to a movie theater, you're selling it at $69.99 every time you sell the game when it comes out. Right. And so your investment versus return is much better. So naturally, we've become involved in that, mainly in the aspect of the sound recording, post-production. So they'll have graphic designers and they'll have writers who come up with the backstory. And sometimes they'll have, graphic photographers that might create the models of the guns. And sometimes they get it a little wrong. But in the post-production part, we'll go out to a gun range with live weapons and we'll shoot them for real. And the sound department will capture the sound of not only the gunfire, but like, what does a bullet sound like when it hits glass? If you're shooting at a building or a shed, what does it sound like when you're hitting, cinder block with bullets? Because every one of those sounds has a different, unique sound to it. And so that's where we come in. We provide the actual weapon that's in the drop-down menu. We provide, different little things, like if you're going to shoot a suppressed weapon, we'll actually do a recording with subsonic ammunition, because that's the way it's used in the real world, right? And so there's little things like that we as the firearms authorities, if you want to call it, I hate to use the word expert, but they come to us for that firearms knowledge, and then we can help improve the game, or donate just a little bit of realism, because as anyone who's gotten recently out of the military will know, when you're being fired at with an AK-47 or you're being shot at with an M16, it sounds different. And being able to recognize the different acoustic signature of each of those different types of firearms sometimes is the difference between success and failure out on the battlefield, especially when you're dealing with an urban environment. And so most of the game companies, they know that demand is out there for accuracy. And so they come to us, and we do the best we can to give that to them.
It's fun to see the reaction of gamers when they see or touch real firearms from their games. Yeah,
it is, isn't it? We experience that quite a bit, especially in the more modern games. The models that are built are usually of the latest, greatest firearm that's out there that, Joe Public will never be able to find in a gun store, and so they get to interact with that particular firearm within the gameplay. But then if they actually manage to touch or pick up or feel the gun, it's like, oh my God, I didn't realize how heavy it was, or how light it was, or this feels so much more comfortable or less comfortable than the AR I shoot, So we do different types of events. Sometimes it's tied in with promotional events for different video games. Other times it's different things supporting law enforcement or film or, stuff like that. And you do get those people out there that they're familiar with the firearm, but they've never really touched one of them before. World War II games, like you said, original Thompsons are getting harder and harder to find. British Sten guns are available in the UK in museums, but they're not as prevalent here. So it is kind of an excitement. And it is nice to see people's eyes light up when you see that kind of spark, created in their eyes.
Yeah. Speaking of World War II weapons, I was watching an episode of Hollywood Weapons where you guys had some grease guns and you were firing from that SUV into the ballistics dummies.
Yes.
Me and my son got to talking about MP40s and Thompsons. He was telling me I can't remember which game he was talking about, but apparently they had the MP40 and the Thompson machine gun in there, and people were thinking that the MP40 had so much more power than the Thompson when the video game creators actually made them equal. But the MP40 sounded a little bassier, I guess. So people were complaining about it. So all the game creators did was kind of tone down the sound from the MP40, but everything was still the same. And everybody's, oh yeah, it's great now. It's perfectly fine. Yeah. So it's kind of funny how even just the slightest thing can change people's minds when it comes to video games as well.
For sure. And, a lot of people in today's kind of very quick paced rat race kind of life and everything, they learn things from movies, from television shows, and from video games. And it is important to get it accurate, and it's nice to see that people actually pick up on those differences. Yeah. One of the kind of the banes of my existence as a motion picture armorer has always been movies and television where you see people shooting suppressed firearms, and it's got like this classic thump sound that, real suppressed weapons don't sound that way. Right. But sometimes you have to throw it into a movie or a game because that's what the public expects. It's nice when they want the realism, but you're still catering. It's still entertainment. In a movie, you're still just telling a story. So certain items, whether they're 100% accurate or not to real life, it doesn't really matter as long as you're kind of getting your point across.
Yeah, that was one of the things I've always noticed with movies, and before I got into guns and actually had shot some suppressed firearms, that noise that they make in the movies, it's like choo choo. I'm like, then you hear it for real, and you're like, oh my god, why is that? And then now every time I hear it, I'm just like, oh my god, that's ridiculous.
And again, back in the day, there were, how many gangster movies have you seen where they have a revolver with a silencer screwed onto it and it's deadly silent, and that would never happen. There was only one revolver made that was designed to be used with a silencer that would have been silent like that, than the Gant revolver that the Soviet Union used. But, they didn't know those things back then. Back in the day, also, it was very difficult to blank a semi-automatic or a fully automatic firearm. So you'll see revolvers being used in film, even if they weren't the appropriate firearm, but they're the only thing they had blanks for that they could make look real on a movie screen. And that's also one of the things we work at. We develop new technology for blanking these different firearms so that it will be more authentic and it'll sound better and it'll look better and things like that. So it's part of the fun of the game, part of fun of the challenging work. And it's always nice to hear positive feedback. But when you do hear some feedback about, oh, this wasn't right or that wasn't right in the game or the movie, we try to learn from our mistakes, not make the same mistake twice, and just kind of improve it next time.
Right. So how long have you been working with ISS, right? And what's that all about?
So I've been working in the film industry a little over 20 years now. Independent Studio Services, or ISS, is the largest prop house, definitely within North America, probably within the world. And we have a very developed weapons department, thousands and thousands of firearms and highly skilled technicians and members of our staff that basically support television, movies, stage plays, anything, commercials, anything that is entertainment world related. And primarily we support it by providing professional armors and blank fire weapons for, film sets and television sets. We have a little bit of our business because of the personnel that we have and the inventory that we have. We have a little bit of our business that's real world business, where we deal with law enforcement, governments, militaries, private companies that are developing new firearms and things like that. And we help support that where we can, when we can. I would tell you more about that specific aspect, but then I'd have to come kill you. So I don't really want to do that. So.
It's like some CIA stuff right there.
Again, I refer back to my former comment.
Okay, so I've been watching that show Hollywood Weapons. So how did that whole show come about?
Well, Hollywood Weapons, it's like a bit of a roller coaster ride. We, of course, are finishing up airing all the new episodes from season 4 right now. So we do have 4 seasons out there. And production company was making a show called Gun Stories with Joe Mantegna. Okay. And we started providing some of the weapons. It was very interesting, very, very kind of fascinating documentary type show, actually, where the host...
He was the guy that was the quarterback for the 49ers, right? You seen that movie Waterboy, right?
See, I expected a whole different level on this podcast, but I guess not. No, he was not a quarterback, but he's a very well-known star. He does some of the voices on, he was Fat Tony on The Simpsons.
Yep.
He played, in Criminal Minds and many, many other shows. He was in one of the Godfather movies, and very talented guy, nicest guy you'll ever meet. And he was doing this documentary where we started providing some of the guns and the on-set armor work for the show. And one of the things they do in this documentary is they have, again, I don't like using the word expert, but they have like subject matter experts that give little sound bites, little interview clippets throughout the show. And at one point they had asked me, they said, well, you're here helping us as the armor, and you're very knowledgeable about the guns. Would you mind being on camera? Which, again, as I told you before we started the live part of the podcast here, I'm very antisocial. I don't like people. I don't want to talk to them or anything like that. So I had to think for a minute, do I really want to be in front of the camera? But I did, mainly because I wanted to give an option or a spotlight or a voice to the behind the camera people that usually don't get a lot of credit for putting on a show. And after, gosh, they just celebrated season 10 of Gun Stories with Joe Mantegna, 100 episodes, which is phenomenal. After a while, when I was doing some of those interviews, the same people, Tim Kremen and Dan Ram, who helped create Gun Stories, came up with this other idea for Hollywood Weapons. It's always been described as a kind of a Mythbuster on steroids kind of show. And they said, hey, there's been good feedback. You can obviously talk comfortably on camera. Would you be interested in doing this other show with another host? And we gave it a shot, See what I did there? A little gun guy humor. We gave it a shot,
Unintended.
a tough crowd. Anyway, we gave it a shot. We made a pilot. It got thankfully picked up. Me and Terry Schappert, my co-host, we have a very good chemistry together. And I truly feel that, we do a good job of putting on an entertaining, interesting, and educational show. We don't fake anything. In fact, we've had a few episodes where every single one of the tests we did was a failure. And it was kind of like, well, do we do something to make the show or episode more exciting? And the answer is no, we don't. That's what we promised the viewers. We were going to test things from movies and television and see if it could be done for real. So sometimes it can, and sometimes it can't. And it's just, one of those things. I hope people enjoy watching it. We've gotten very good feedback from it. And hopefully there'll be another season. We'll see.
Actually, Warsaw Patriot, I've never watched that show, unfortunately. Have you worked on that show, Band of Brothers? Did you have any
Band of Brothers was primarily filmed in Europe. We did not provide any of the firearms for it. However, now that you're telling me that you've never watched that show before, I don't know that I can pod, because you got going series. It's a very, very good series, very well done. Tom Hanks was, of course, involved in the production of it. It was very much a spin-off, if you will, of the Saving Private Ryan type of filmmaking. If you're ever
an
in
HBO series, wasn't it?
I believe so. If you're ever in Georgia, there is a little town, Currahee, that's right outside where the boot camp was. Mount Currahee is the one you see in the series where they go running up the hill during boot camp. And there is an amazing little airborne museum there that's built in the old train station that was in the town. And this is where the true people who the characters in the show were based on, this is where they went through boot camp. And there's some amazing memorabilia there that if you're, I was in Atlanta doing a film and I had a day off and it was kind of like, what do I really want to do? I don't want to go very far, but I traveled 3 hours to see that museum and it was worth every minute of it. And so I highly recommend everyone, if you've never been there before, or even if you have, go back and see it again. Pretty amazing place.
Right on. Yeah, since I said I didn't watch that show, I've been told to turn in my man card. And that
I was trying to be polite, but now that you mention it, yes, turn in your man card. It's one of the most well-made mini series, both as far as its historical accuracy, the acting, the uniforms, the weaponry, and the scope of what was in there, because several of the last episodes deal with the fact that they had already won the war. And they talk about what it was like during the occupation of Germany, actually after the war, a subject that doesn't really get very much attention. And so people think of Band of Brothers. I mean, the number one thing you think of, it's like a war story, but it's really not. It's a human story. It's a human story that occurs during World War II. But there's so much more involved in that show that it's worth the time investment. You should binge watch it right after this podcast, and then I'll call you up in a day or two, and there will be a test. And so I expect you to have good answers when I ask the questions.
It's a test to get my man card back. Is that what it is?
I'm not promising anything. I'm just saying there'll be a test. What the results will be, we'll see when you're done.
So now I got to figure out where I can watch it.
It is available as a box set on DVD, and there's some behind the scenes details that are always fascinating. Of course, shows like that, being that they are war or military oriented, are always a big challenge for us when we do jobs like that. We did 13 hours, and we did American Sniper, and we did Lone Survivor. When you do jobs like that, we of course work on SWAT, which thankfully is back up and running now. But these shows where the characters constantly carry guns throughout the whole episode or the whole film are very challenging from the armorer's point of view, because it's not, a cast of 20 and you have one guy with a gun in one scene. It's a cast of 250 and every one of them has a gun. In fact, the heroes might have 3 or 4 or 5 guns, not only because their character carries them in the film, but because we have different levels of blanks in the industry. A full blank, a half blank, a quarter blank, and they're all different props that are used for filming specific types of scenes. And so you could have a movie, like a very intense movie that we did called Collateral, which was the story of a single assassin, and he basically had one gun throughout the whole movie, right? But we had about 8 or 9 of those guns on the prop truck, each one tuned to a specific purpose that could be used in a different scene. So yeah, it's kind of cool, but those military shows are definitely, very challenging.
All right. So you had mentioned before that you were a gunsmith. So and now you're an armorer. So what's the difference between a gunsmith and an armorer?
So again, that's one of the things that I kind of look back and kind of roll my eyes at. I trained as a gunsmith. All I wanted to do was be a gunsmith, sit at a bench all day long, tinkering with guns, fixing them, improving them, because my focus in firearms is really the mechanisms. They just fascinate me. I of course shoot firearms a lot. I shoot a lot both in my private life and in my professional career. I do it for a living, dealing with firearms, but the shooting part of it is not really what I'm interested in. It's actually working on the mechanisms, learning the history behind them, looking at a design and trying to figure out what was in the designer's head when he designed the firearm. So that's what a gunsmith does, and a smith, be he a gunsmith, a blacksmith, a silversmith, is someone who's supposed to have total mastery over his or her craft. So if I'm a gunsmith, I should be able to not only weld and fix a metal component, I should be able to source the wood, create the stock, stain it, and so on and so forth. Basically taking raw elements and turning it into something. That's what the definition of a smith is. And that's what I wanted to be. When I started out in this industry, in the film industry, it was as a gunsmith, creating blanking technology for film and supporting those guns for motion picture and television production. We wound up at one point working on a film where we had to build a custom creation. It was a firearm, but it was more of a sci-fi imaginary type thing. Right. And as the guy who helped design it in the shop and physically built it, I wound up having to go out on set to support the weapon, because while you watch the movie and these guns look cool and slick and efficient and all that, they're tricky, they're complicated, they're not designed to shoot blanks. You only get to see the one good take out of 20 that we did, when we were filming it. So they're hard to maintain on set. And I happened to wind up on set with this series of guns that I built. And then from there, it was like, well, you did a good job on that. We need you out there. And it's funny that I tell this to prospective people trying to come into the industry. I can take anyone and train you to be an on-set armorer. If you have common sense and you have a somewhat rooted basis in firearms, I can teach you the technical end of it. It's not that difficult. If you could drive a car, you can probably learn the technicalities of most weapons. But when you're working on set, there's so much more than just the technicality of the weapons. You're dealing with actors, you're dealing with directors, you're dealing with having to maintain the legalities, because contrary to what people believe, Hollywood doesn't get a pass on firearms laws. We are like everybody else. We have to maintain the same licenses and permits and things like that. And, the government sees us the same way as like a gun store entity. So there's a lot of things that happen. Security, how do you lock the guns up on set? Not only that, you got to make them run right. You're also the safety officer on set when there's gunfire. Hey, Mr. Actor, you can't stand here. We have to move you. It's what we call gunfight choreography. So the technical end of the guns is really maybe 20% of that. The 80% that's the most challenging is all those other aspects that I've mentioned, and finding the right people that have the correct mix of those talents is very, very difficult. I had technical guys that, they would put, Eugene Stoner to shame, but I can't have them talk to anyone and send them out on the set because they don't have the people skills. I have people that have great people skills and great gift of gab, but they just don't understand the technical end of the guns. And so it's finding that mix that's always very, very interesting.
So here's a good question. It says, so if machine guns are banned, does Hollywood have to go through the ATF and permit certification to handle them?
We are governed by the ATF. It's a little bit of a misnomer to say that machine guns are banned, because that is technically not true. There are ways to apply for certain permits and licenses and things like that. And if you have one of the things they call is just cause, which we have because we're working in the film industry, you can acquire certain permits to do certain things with machine guns. Machine guns are not banned completely. You have companies, let's say, that develop optics for the military, let's say, and they can be licensed and legally in possession of machine guns because they need to test the scopes that they're selling to the government. There's special licenses for collectors and things like that. So yes, you don't normally see fully automatic weapons on the wall at a gun store where Joe Public can just walk in and buy one. But to say that machine guns are banned is not a correct statement. But yes, Hollywood, if you want to call it that, or the entertainment industry, has to follow all the rules and regulations, all the ATF mandates. In fact, they're there at our shop multiple times a year, both at the federal level, at the state level, at the city level, and at the county level. Very, very highly restricted, very governed.
Yeah, I would imagine with the amount of weapons you guys have in your vault over there, that they probably show up pretty often to inspect things and all that. So,
well, I don't think it really has so much a matter to do with the quantity. It has to do with that we're a civilian entity, if you will, and their job is to regulate the civilian population, for better or for worse. They need to know that the laws that are out there on the books are being followed. And so we have a very good working relationship with those entities. And, it's not good or bad or indifferent. It's part of the job. We are required to let productions know, for instance, what the legal limitations are of the use of certain firearms, certain types of firearms. And it's all part of our job.
right on. People are asking what state are you in? Obviously, being in Hollywood, I guess that's out in California, where the ISS is, or.
So our main shop is in California, but we have branch offices all over the United States. We also have a sister company that we own in the UK called Cohort Film Services that also provides firearms. And we're in Georgia, we're in Louisiana, we're in New Mexico, we're in Texas, pretty much wherever the film industry migrates to, we have a presence there to be able to support the different films. And of course, there are ways to legally ship firearms back and forth, all over the world. They're very complex and very labor intensive, but we can support film projects internationally.
We got somebody that wants to come to work for you. The crazy
Man, if I had a penny for every time I've heard that before.
He's actually very knowledgeable with guns. He's been around the firearms industry for quite a while. He actually just got his citizenship to the United States. He's been here for quite some time. Yeah, and he's not called the Crazy Scotsman for nothing. He is truly from Scotland. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Scotland has, there's a long history of, people don't realize it. All they remember is Braveheart and, guys with broadswords, charging, wearing kilts. But Scotland has always been a very central part of the Industrial Revolution. A lot of technology has come out of Scotland, be it shipbuilding or steam engines or firearms under certain conditions and things like that. And a lot of the technologies and utensils and everyday kind of appliances that we use today, people don't realize are rooted in things that were developed in Scotland.
Right on. All right, well, we got another question for you. Have you ever worked with Kurtzman? I guess he's a special effects guy.
Boy, I that name does not sound familiar to me. But one thing that you should know that, when you're working on like a major motion picture film, the crew could be three people. More really remember, and I may have worked with someone, and it's weird on a movie set, you can interact with someone for 4 or 5 days in a row and actually never learn their name because you're only called into set on the specific thing. Our situation is a little bit weird if you think about it. Though we work in coordination with the effects department, I deal with one side of the gunfight, the firearms, and they deal with the other, the bullet hits. And so even though we're on set together at the same time in the same scene, we might actually be 75 yards apart because I'm over at one end with the guys that are shooting the guns and they're over by some brick wall trying to make it look like the bullets are impacting. So I apologize if I have worked with that person and I just don't remember the name. I apologize, but as my kids keep telling me, I'm getting old and senile. So
I get that all the time too.
Yeah.
So you said you had a location in Georgia. So have you guys ever worked on the set of like The Walking Dead, since they filmed that down there in Georgia?
We have. The Walking Dead has been a huge boom for Georgia itself. They have, an entire industry built around it now. Very, very popular show. It's expanded into comic books, graphic novels, things like that. And some of our guns have featured on those shows, and some of our armors have worked on that series. Also, the same thing with Fear of the Walking Dead, which is, I guess, like a spinoff. And I guess I say I guess because, oddly enough, I don't always get to watch very many of these shows that we work on. In fact, sometimes one of the idiosyncrasies of the entertainment industry is you could get called out to set to work on a specific show, but when it's being filmed, it's being called, Larry's Love Project.
Right.
And when it actually gets released, it gets released under a different name. And so we deal with that all the time. People call us up and say, hey, did you work on such and such a project? And we're like, no, we can't find it in our computer system, and the name doesn't sound familiar. Well, in fact, we did the whole show, but it was released under a different title because production doesn't necessarily tell us that. We're a vendor for production. We just provide them with stuff. We don't make the movies ourselves.
So with your company that you work for there, ISS, so all you guys do is really provide weapons, and do you coordinate them on like accuracy of how they're using the weapons or anything like that?
Well, first of all, like I said, Independent Studio Services is the largest prop house around, so we have a lot more than just weaponry.
Right.
We have excuse me. We have cell phones and sunglasses and jewelry, and we make spaceships, and we do just all kinds of different things there. So it's not just firearms. I just happen to work in the firearms department. And yes, because of the legalities of picking up a firearm like that and leaving, the building with it, again, we have to follow all the ATF rules. We're always out on set with those firearms. So when you're watching a film and you see the frame, we are just outside a frame where you can't see us standing right there, literally within arm's reach, to be able to demonstrate control over those weapons. That means that you also wind up standing next to the actor, interacting with the actor, handing off the weapon. And so you kind of become a little bit of a technical advisor as well, because once you're on the set, the armorer is responsible for all aspects of anything that's happening with that firearm on set. And you want it to be realistic looking on camera, you want it to be safe, and you want the actor to look good. So we do actor training. We take them shooting with the weapons they're going to use so that they can feel the recoil of the blanks and things like that. We'll help with the selection of the weapons. Not always, but sometimes we do that as well. Sometimes, you're stuck, let's say, with a specific firearm because the writer scripted it. It's written into the script. He picks up his 1911 And so you're obligated. Well, they called out a 1911. Here's a 1911. But what if, it's a child that's got to shoot the gun in the movie? Now his or her hands are not big enough. And the fact that a 1911 has a grip safety, it becomes even more complex for the actor to manipulate it. And so now you're the person that has to say, well, I know the action is scripted that way, but this is what the problem is. Here's a different suggestion for a different gun. And if you read a lot and you read your favorite spy novel, and then you know that the character is supposed to be carrying a specific gun, and then in the movie, when it finally comes out, they have a different gun, that might be one of the reasons that it was necessary to change it from the written word to the visual medium, because what they say it's getting done with that gun in the book isn't physically possible up on the screen. So that, again, that's the part where the technical and the knowledge and the history and the diplomacy of our position all kind of meld into one position to assist production in getting the shot that they want.
So what I really want to know, and what something's bugged me for so long, because I was a pretty big fan of The Walking Dead, is how come after 9 seasons nobody could ever get Andrew Lincoln to hold that python correctly while he was shooting it? He's always aiming at the ground,
I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that I might incriminate myself. I can't really comment on that. Other than to say, again, that we're telling a story. This isn't real, okay? We're telling a story, and the writer has input in the story. The director has input in the story. The prop maker has input in the story. The wardrobe, the hair and makeup, they all have a little bit of an input into the story. And so do the actors. And some actors are more stylized than others and things like that. And so some little quirk or some visual that the director liked from some episode back in season 1 might be the thing that sticks and becomes the trademarked item of that show. I always compare a television show or a movie to a mosaic, beautiful mosaic made up of 1,000 little polished stones. Well, each department only gets one stone, and they sit there and they polish it up all day long, and then they all hand it off to the editor, and the editor's the person that creates the magic of putting all these little stones together and making the beautiful mosaic that is a movie or a television show. And so it's hard to say. Maybe it's just the way that actor likes to hold the gun. Maybe again, it was some quirk that the director liked the visual on it. It's very hard to say what creates those specific issues. But again, who cares? We're telling a story. If we were doing, Band of Brothers, which is a historical, documentary almost about an event that really did happen. By the way, that was the show that you said you've never seen before, right? And you got your man card pulled for that. But anyway, that show, on a show like that, you're not just telling a story anymore. So it would be very, very wrong to, let's say, have the incorrect firearm in that movie, or these guys that were supposed to be airborne troops. They were the cream of the crop back in World War II. Every actor there must hold his firearm correctly. Right. Because, for gosh sakes, you saw in the beginning episodes how they actually went through boot camp to learn how to use the guns. So, we actually do that on the shows like that with the actors. We put them through a 2 or 3 week boot camp. Right. So there are some projects where there's a little bit more stress put on the accuracy, and other ones not, if he's not holding the gun correctly. And again, I haven't really watched these shows. I work on them, but I don't get to watch them. Right. If he's not holding the gun correctly, let me ask the question, did it still kill the zombie?
Yeah, he got a headshot every time, but
right?
He's facing the muzzle towards the ground.
It doesn't really matter. He was successful, Maybe that was just the current zombie killing tactic.
Right, there you go. He's ricocheting them, like you said.
There you go.
Ricochet. It's an Irish term.
Yep.
So, like you said, you had to be there for when they're using the live weapons for the blanks, to make the actual pew 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 noises and everything. So, how about when they're just carrying them around, or in their holster? Are they still live firearms, or at that point are they inoperable, just purely prop?
So, anytime an actor has to handle a firearm on set, he or she will get training with that firearm, and it really comes down to what has to happen in the scene and the comfort level of the actor. And when I say that, what I mean is the comfort level, of the actor. Let's say they're a police detective, and the entire movie they're seen with a holster on their belt with their detective badge next to it, and the firearm is in their belt. How if you are running, let's say you're late for a meeting and you're running out to your car and you've got your phone in your pocket and your keys in your pocket and all that, you might run in a certain way where you got your hand on your phone or something like that. Well, a police officer would do the same thing, right? And so that gun on their belt becomes part of them. It becomes part of their method of acting. Now, I could put a rubber gun in there, but then when they're running, it wouldn't quite look the same, would it? Because they don't feel the same weight. They don't have this, their physicality changes. So there are actors that like to always carry the real thing, whether they're doing gunfire or not, because it helps their performance. Right. There are times like a stunt where they need to fall down and maybe they're falling on the side where the gun is. I'm going to insist on a rubber gun in the holster, or we might even take the holster off. You can't see it under their business jacket, whether it's there or not. So when they fall down, they don't fall down with the holster on. So there's all kinds of decisions that get made kind of as it's happening on set. And that's where you really need to kind of be able to think quickly on your feet and everything and swap things out to make sure that you've got the right prop in the right spot for the right scene.
Okay, so Warsaw Patriot has a question. Have you ever filmed any movies in Russia and shot any guns over there?
I have not. The closest that we've gotten to Russia is filming in the Czech Republic. The Soviet Union, obviously, when it was the Soviet Union, was kind of closed to outsiders. Now that it's, again, an independent, free Russia, it's much more open to the West. There's been one or two times where I've worked on productions that wanted to go to Russia and film, mainly because of locations, like we want to film in Red Square or, some of the iconic visuals. But the problem is that when you're filming a movie, you don't want to just film in Red Square. You might also want to blow up Red Square. And maybe the Russian government doesn't really want you to do that. So the cool thing about the entertainment industry is it's an industry on wheels. We can take it anywhere. And so there are a lot of times where, Cleveland, Ohio doubles for Washington, D.C., or for New York City, or maybe some city in Canada, doubles as some European country. But more and more, we try, again, just for accuracy, if you're filming a movie about something that happens in France, the production will try to film some part of it in France. If it's Europe, same thing. If it's Thailand or Hong Kong or Japan or whatever, as long as the budget is there, we'll try our best to film some part of it there, because it's cool when you're the audience and you're sitting in the movie theater, which hopefully this COVID situation will pass real quick and we'll be able to get audiences back into movie theaters. But it's cool when you sit there and you go like, Oh my God, I was in that square in that town in France. I saw that bakery, or I ate at that bakery, or I've been to that museum or something. And when those little one or two items spread throughout a movie like that is what sells the realism, and then the audience buys into this little make-believe bubble that we've created of 2 hours of a story arc that, otherwise it would look very flat and unrealistic. And it's like, yeah, just array on your means. Go to Russia just because of all the museums that they have there, much less actually filming in Russia. It would be a cool experience.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they got some really beautiful architecture over there too.
Yeah.
Some of the buildings and things. First time I ever seen some of the buildings they had over there, I didn't think it was Russia. I thought it was like maybe India or something because of the shapes, like the teardrop.
Oh, the onion, basically the
shaped.
onions on top. Yeah. The spires and everything. It's interesting.
Mhm. So, what was, I guess, your favorite movie set to work on, if you have one?
That's a tough question. It's interesting, and I don't think the viewing public realizes this, but when you work in the industry, you live like in a little bit of a time capsule. Because like we said, if I work on a film and then the film goes to post-production, that movie might not hit the movie theaters for a year. And a year down the road, I'm already working on another movie or two movies down the road. I've forgotten about that particular movie. And again, also, sometimes the movies come out and hit the theaters with a different name, different title than what they were when we were working on them. So we don't even know that they came out sometimes. But there are some memorable ones. ISS is very, very fortunate, and I'm fortunate to be working at ISS, that we work at the very highest levels. That doesn't mean that we don't do small projects. We do. We're one of the only companies left that will actually still work with film school students to do, school projects. But by and large, we work at a very, very high level. So I have to say that working with Quentin Tarantino was a very cool experience, very different being on his set. Working with Michael Mann, who he himself is very knowledgeable about firearms and everything. And so he demands a certain level of participation of the armor and accuracy of the firearms and the tactics and the technical advising and everything. And of course, whenever you do jobs like that, professionally, it's challenging, and it raises your bar just a little bit higher, and so on. So those are probably two of my most memorable ones. But then, I can say also, I had a film student come into our shop. He was doing his, I guess you'd call it his thesis for his end of school project. I didn't actually get to go out on set with him, but I was able to advise him about all the different options, and we picked out, the selection of guns and things like that. He went on to win an award for that film, and we have remained lifelong friends. So whether it's a big project or a small project, it really doesn't matter. I think it's the end result. I always jokingly, but not really jokingly, say that my favorite project that I worked on is the last project that I worked on, that they got what they want. The shot worked, the guns functioned, everybody was safe, nobody got hurt, and we all packed up our stuff at the end of the day and got to go home and come back, do it again the next day. Because there's tons of moving parts on a motion picture set. The safety standards are very, very strict. I don't necessarily enjoy being on set, because the stresses of the safety factors and all those other elements, I've always got butterflies in my stomach whenever I'm on set, no matter how many times I've done this. But I had a very, very good friend of mine whose opinion I respect. He said it really well when he said, well, but that's why you're good at your job, because you have the butterflies in your stomach. If you were kind of nonchalant about it and you didn't take it seriously and all that, that's when bad things start happening. and everything. So
Definitely agree with that sentiment.
yeah, I mean, you can't. The rules are there for a reason. The guidelines are there for a reason. You have to be able to be flexible enough to make the shot that is needed fit within the laws, the rules, and the guidelines. And when you do it, and it comes out with kind of a wow factor to it, you know, the audience will always remember the gunfight from Heat that Michael Mann did, you know, in the bank, and the gunfight they have down the street. When it becomes something memorable like that, or you built a firearm that became a recognizable kind of pop culture item, that's the satisfactory part of the job. But all of that only happens when it's all over at the end of it. While you're in the moment, it's a very demanding work environment, be it the armorer or the assistant director or the special effects crew or the hair and makeup people or the wardrobe. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're working there on set, it's an extremely demanding, dynamic, challenging environment. And to be able to do something and then see the audience go, "Oh, that was so cool,"
Right.
That's the rewarding part.
He wants to know, is your fun part the fun part of cleaning all the guns after you guys shoot them? I'm sure that's a lot of work.
You know, it is. It's a huge amount, especially, again, if you were working, let's say, on a movie like Saving Private Ryan, where there's hundreds of guns. By the way, there was a good spin-off of Saving Private Ryan called Band of Brothers. I really think that's a show that you should see.
I think I might watch that.
You should. But when you're doing it, one of the things that the armorers get involved in is, you know, you put in a 14 or 15-hour day on set. You're concerned about the legalities. You're concerned about the safety. You're concerned about, you know, that everything works. And then when they yell wrap at 11 o'clock at night, everybody else goes away. But as the armorer, you need to start cleaning all those guns, because tomorrow we're going to do this all over again. And so you may wind up being in the prop truck till 1 a.m. cleaning all the guns, because it's your responsibility that they get inspected and they get cleaned and that they're ready for tomorrow's scene and all that. And on some really, really big shows, we'll actually have a daytime crew and a nighttime crew. And one will come in and actually run the guns on set. And then there'll be another crew that comes in at wrap and spends the whole night cleaning the guns so that they're ready back for set work the next day. So I don't know that it's any more or less fun. It's very labor intensive. And after you've done 14 hours or 16 hours on set, you really just want to go back to your hotel room, take a shower, and go to bed. But you have, this is part of your job. You have to do it. There's a little bit of a kind of a slackening of the tension, because you're not in front of the cameras. You know, you're kind of working at your own pace. But the slower your pace, the longer you're still there cleaning those guns. So not my favorite part, but it's a part that's, you know, an important part of the show.
Yeah, everything has a process, and like you said, and you gotta follow it, so that way everything goes off without a hitch every day. You know, you won't want to bring any dirty guns on set that don't fire, because then it's a cut scene, and you gotta, you know, go back and fix the problem, and it could take even longer to go through your day. And
just imagine a scene where your lead actor has a firearm. He or she is firing at some other people that have a firearm, but around them, there's a helicopter that flies overhead with a guy with a machine gun leaning out shooting. There's special effects explosions going off everywhere. There's bullet hits going off on all the walls. It takes hours to set up a take like that. And if the take is ruined because your firearm didn't work at the right time, it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's like, oh my God, now we got to reset. It's 3.5 hours to reset everything. And so we with having worked both in the real world and in the entertainment world, we actually strive in the entertainment world for more reliability than in the real world. Because if you're a police officer or if you're a member in the armed services and you get into a altercation where you need to use your firearm and the firearm malfunctions, you're trained to simply clear the malfunction and keep on going. Nobody cares what that looks like. But on camera, it's got to look flawless. And so we actually strive, follow me on this. We strive with a gun that was not designed to shoot blanks, that with real ammunition may only be 98% reliable. We're trying to make that gun that wasn't designed on blanks 101% reliable. And that's hard enough with modern guns. Imagine if you're dealing with, a 1908 Luger or a Japanese Type 92 heavy machine gun. It's very, very challenging, both in a technical aspect and in a filmmaking aspect.
So do you have to modify some of these guns in order to make them run with blanks
Absolutely.
properly?
Yeah. Again, if you think about it like a common semi-automatic handgun, you have a cartridge case. Let's see if I can do this. You have a cartridge case. Oops, there we go. You have a cartridge case and you have a projectile. And when the cartridge case ignites the powder on the inside, the projectile gets pushed down range because of a buildup of pressure.
Right.
But with the blanks, you don't have the projectile. So we have to come up with ways to trick the mechanism into creating the pressure needed to move the slide back and forth. Because, let's face it, the gun is a stupid, inanimate object. It doesn't know whether it's shooting a blank or a live cartridge. All it knows is it needs X amount of energy to move the slide from here to here. And so we create a whole new set of technologies, and the guns have to be altered dramatically on the inside mechanism to get them to work with blanks, much less work reliably with blanks.
Yeah, that's got to be a little hard. I'm sure you put like softer springs and stuff in there for like the semi-auto pistols, I'm sure.
There's a whole ton of technologies that we've created. I could tell you all about them in a separate podcast, but then I'd have to kill you. So, I don't know if it's worth it to you or not, but you never cut springs. Never cut springs. Yeah.
So how's working with Quentin Tarantino? He has got to be one of my favorite writers, directors out there.
Very unique individual.
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me the most after having worked on set with him, I was the lead armorer on Django Unchained. I had a whole armor crew that was doing stuff in all kinds of different locations, but one of the locations was the scenes in the snow that we filmed in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, in horrendous conditions. It was like, I don't even remember, I think it was like 22 degrees below zero or something like that. Just absolutely horrendous conditions. And after that particular scene, we had done some other stuff in California. We had done some other stuff, I think in Louisiana. But when we did the scenes in the snow in Wyoming, what struck me was that Quentin was right there in the mud and the blood and the beer. You know what I mean? He wasn't in a tent watching things through a monitor or anything like that. He was right there in the trenches with the troops. And that, again, when people enjoy films and they like watching it, and they think, oh, it must be so glamorous working on movie sets and stuff like that. Like, oh my God, the horror stories I could tell you. But when you're, it's freezing conditions, or you're filming in Morocco. I spent, on one show, I spent 29 days in Morocco. It was 127 degrees every day. That's not glamorous.
No, it's definitely not.
it's fun to tell the story afterwards, but it's not glamorous. So to be on a set where the director is right there in the harsh conditions with you and all that, it I don't know, it binds the crew together. It gives you a special feeling. And Quentin does it out of a pure, he's got his own enthusiasm about making movies. It's not just a paycheck. We all do this because we have to pay our bills. And I'm sure it's the same for him. He's got bills to pay. But when he's doing it, he's a very creative person. And he's just very enthusiastic about being there on set and making a movie and everything. And it's infectious. Crew gets, that vibe. Yeah, very high.
Right on. So let's talk a little bit more about like Hollywood Weapons. That first episode, I know we were talking about it before we got on the stream, but that first episode to me, I thought it was exciting. When he was down there in that tank and he shot, what was it, a 44 Magnum that y'all had?
So we did a 9mm Glock because that's what was used in the show. So we were trying to prove whether in the real world that was doable. It was not. Right. Then we stepped it up to a 357 Magnum, which managed to penetrate the windshield underwater, but not with very much force. So it made it through, but you can literally just see the bullet make it through the windshield and then just kind of drop in the tank. And then we went to a 454 Casull. It was not a 44 Magnum. It was a
big boy,
a big boy. And that decimated that windshield. I mean, there was no deviation. It went straight through that thing like it was butter. So that was a very interesting episode to do. And being that it was the pilot, none of us had ever done anything like that before. So it's a little bit different from the rest of the series. The rest of the series has a little bit more humor in it, a little bit. It gets a little bit looser, as in a little bit more interaction between all the characters. We've added characters along the way, or I should say hosts along the way, because it's not a character like it's a scripted television show. It's a reality show. We're doing this stuff for real. And as John Carter, our director, always likes to say, that's the commitment we make to the viewing public, that we are not going to fake anything. We are not going to cheat any of the tests. We're going to do the tests as it was seen in the movie or television show. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, why then it doesn't, So a very different way of looking at making a show.
Yeah. Well, when he fired that 454 Casull and the way the water reacted, because I mean, the water adds a whole bunch of extra pressure.
Yes.
But the way the water reacted, and I saw that in slow motion, I was just like awestruck. That looked so incredible. I was like, man.
So John Carter, besides being our director, he's also one of the more skilled people out there as far as slow motion, or what they call high-speed photography, the ability to catch that bullet moving through the air and so on. He's a master at that. And that particular scene, you can see what's called cavitation, the vortex that's created when you shoot a bullet underwater. By the way, it's the same kind of thing that's created when you try to shoot a torpedo through the water or have a submarine go through the water. But yeah, it's amazing how the 9mm was like, that was interesting. Little bit of what I expected, little bit of not. Oh, wow. Yeah, the 357 Magnum was way more as expected, because it's got much more, velocity and knockdown power and so on. And then the 454 Casull was like, oh my God, that was just way beyond anything, we expected. The visuals on that were just so amazing, that he was able to catch that in that slow motion. And it's like, again, we try to pick tests that when we show it in slow motion, there's no doubt that we did it for real. right? It's not faked. It's not like we tried to Photoshop anything. And when he manages with the specific slow motion or high speed camera equipment that he uses, and his whole crew uses, Brooke, our DP, and some of the other crew members, when they capture that, it's like, you can't lie, you can't fake this. There it is for everyone to see. And the fact that it's also very visually stimulating and interesting is just another one of the payoffs of working on the show.
Yeah, and the slow motion stuff definitely is eye-catching for sure. It's kind of funny, just to go back to something you said about the difference between the 9mm and the 357, because I make videos all the time in my backyard, and I like to shoot a lot of stuff. I find junk
You do?
just to shoot it. Yep.
Really? Oh, okay.
I find junk just to shoot it, to see how it reacts to certain calibers when I shoot it. So I had a set of wheels, an aluminum wheel and a steel wheel, and I used a 9mm, a 357, 38 special, and a 20. No, I didn't use the 22, but yeah, just those three particular calibers. And the 9mm did the best out of all three of them. When it came to the aluminum wheel, it punched straight through that aluminum wheel, where the 357 made a pretty big dent in a tiny crack, but the 357 didn't blow through it like I would have expected it to. I mean, you can feel the difference in power when you shoot a 357 compared to a 9mm. The force, the recoil seems a whole lot more, but it didn't perform as well as 9mm, I think, in that instance.
So one of the things, that here's where people learn things from television and movies, and maybe this is where they get the wrong ideas, about what firearms can do. All the ballistic charts in the world, all the hand loading of cartridges in the world, all the science that you try to put into it, at the end of the day, once a projectile hits something, it's very difficult to predict 100% with certainty what it will or will not do. Flying on a path through the air undisturbed, that's different. I can calculate down to the inch what the bullet drop will be, and even below an inch, you could even calculate that out of 2,000 yards, whatever. But once it hits something, it's very difficult to predict. It's also a lot of times hard to do those comparisons, because a lot of times you're not, comparing apples and apples. Because if you take 9mm 115 grain FMJ, which is the easiest, most common stuff to find out there, but then you take a 357 Magnum that's a hollow point, they're designed to react differently when they hit material, so it's not always a fair test I'm not saying that you did it that way, but it's hard to create an apples and apples test for that type of stuff. Some calibers, it depends on the distance. They might be very equivalent as far as, muzzle velocity and muzzle energy at 25 yards, but one of them drops off very quickly after that. And so if you put your target at 50 yards, again, it's not necessarily a fair test sometimes. So that's one of the things that you got to take into consideration. However, I'll also say that 9mm, contrary to what a lot of people think, 9mm is a very good round. Yeah, we have 45 here. Yes, you have 357. You can calculate your muzzle energy and your terminal velocity and your ballistic coefficients and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the majority of law enforcement, let's say, is still wandering around the world with a 9mm and using it effectively. Most military handguns are still 9mm. They wouldn't still be around if they were this weird, weak European round that nobody likes. So especially today with some of the newer loadings, 9mm is a very efficient round.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I used all full metal jackets all the way through with the
Mhm.
38, the 357, and the 9 millimeter, and I shot every single one of them from the same distance, which wasn't very far. I think I was about maybe 15 yards on all
Sure.
three of them. So,
Remember too that and this is where the Grim Reaper comes into this. But if you're in the military or you're a law enforcement officer and you're shooting a specific round at an adversary, is not an aluminum rim.
right,
It's not a wheel, and so how those bullets act as far as what they call ballistic dump, how they release their energy into a soft tissue target might be very different from what they do when they're being shot at like the rim of a tire. And so okay, if I'm going out today with the idea that I might have to shoot tire rims, maybe this round is more effective. If I need this gun for self-defense against another adversary, maybe a different round would be what I want,
yeah. And I've done some similar things like you guys did on the show where you were testing out like the Wild West thing where you were shooting the hat off the guy,
Yep.
or it actually didn't work. And I kind of didn't think it was going to work like you see in the movies because, like you said, the fabric just doesn't have that rigidity to it. Right.
Yeah.
So, but I've taken a washer and a dryer just out of curiosity. So like, in the case of a home invasion, can you go hide behind your washer and dryer? That was the
Yeah.
premise behind the video. So we shot that with we did 22, 38 special, 9 millimeter, 45, 5.56, and a 12 gauge. And I figure that's probably pretty common rounds that
Yep.
some gangsters or thugs might have if they break into your home. So, and I'll tell you what, the dryer or the washing machine did the best out of all of it because
Yeah.
I used one of those traditional old style ones with the spindle in the middle.
Yep.
That big bolt that holds that spindle on, man, that thing stopped that 5.56 and the 12 gauge slug like it was nothing.
Yeah.
So,
punching through the sheet metal on the outside, almost any of those rounds will probably do it. But the washing machine, even ones without the central agitator, which is what that part is called, is the agitator. But they're a tub within the cabinet of the washing machine. So you then have multiple layers that they have to penetrate through. And if you use the analogy of shooting a bullet through an automobile, you could have the bullet penetrate the outside of the door, penetrate the inside of the door, penetrate inside the car, but then get stuck in the other door and it doesn't come out. Or if you shoot a door, but the window is rolled down, there's a good chance that the bullet might not even penetrate the glass and make it into the car. So that's again why I say it's very difficult to predict what a specific round will do once it hits something. And in past years, different entities have developed different tactics, like you've got a hostage situation and they're in front of a window, but the window's closed. Can you take the shot through the glass window? Well, maybe it's safer to have two snipers and one of them simply shoots out the window.
right.
And then once there's no more window to shoot through, you have a better chance of hitting your target with no deflection or deviation. So there's a lot of thought goes into it. It's not all, Billy the Kid just pulling out a gun and shooting and hitting his target, and that's something to remember. And that's something that, again, this is why I wanted to get involved with Hollywood Weapons. People that are dealing with firearms, by and large, are professional, dedicated people with experience and training and stuff like that. Sure, there's always the rotten apple in every bunch, but that's true of anything, anywhere in the world. And we take great pride, like, at ISS, that the projects we work on, the level of projects that we work on, we're in that, top 3%, and if you, stay at the end of a movie and you read the credits, and you should read the credits. You shouldn't just get up and leave once the movie's over. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of people that have spent months away from home. They've missed birthdays and anniversaries and life events of their children. I can't tell you how many I've missed, but they did it because of a dedication to their craft to bring you this enjoyable movie that you can watch over and over and over again. If you read the credits in the armor department, you'll start recognizing some of the same names over and over and over again, because at the level that we're talking about, you know, blockbuster movies and stuff like that, there's not that many people around the world that do it at this level.
Right. And the show that you guys do, that Hollywood Weapons show, I gotta say, it's very entertaining, and it kind of takes I like it because it kind of models after my own heart, because like I said, a lot of my videos that I center around is experimenting with things, and I see you guys trying the things in movies that you question, can this happen? You know, like that thing with Quigley Down Under, where you know you were shooting that rifle from so far away to hit the bucket, and what was the other thing? Oh, killing the two guys with the one bullet,
with one shot, hitting two targets with one projectile. And that's one of those things, you know, that was in the movie. And of course, Quigley was the most amazing shot. You know, his character was the guy who could do that. And we wanted to know if it could be done for real with that gun at those ranges. But that movie, besides just being a phenomenal movie, you know, Tom Selleck, great actor, great story for it and everything. But that's where, like, this pop culture, this movie kind of transcended being a movie and became part of real life, because the idea of a sharpshooter hitting two targets that got lined up in a row is now known as a Quigley. So snipers in our military, you know, law enforcement people, long-range target shooters, this is a term that has now entered the public vocabulary, and it's because of a movie. And so I think it's really a very interesting aspect of film and television, where it can actually, you know, they say art imitates real life and real life imitates art. And this is a perfect example of how one influences the other. And if I was in a military environment and I was speaking to a sniper and he said something about pulling a Quigley, I would know exactly what he was talking about. And most of the firearms enthusiasts around would as well.
I would now too, because of that episode that you guys aired. Yep. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. We got a question here. Mario Mosen, he wasn't here earlier when we were talking about it, but he wants to know, how do you make the gun shoot so well with the blanks? He's in the Army, and he says they use blanks in the military and it jams their guns a lot.
Yeah, and he's true. And thank you for the question. The fact that you're noticing the difference illustrates the difference between what we do with blanks and what blanks do in the military. Blanks in the military are very low powered. They're engineered to not have a lot of muzzle flash. Contrary to popular belief, blanks are not meant for training in the military. Blanks were invented to shoot rifle grenades off of rifles in the military. The fact that they're now utilized for training is kind of a side effect. We don't use military blanks. They're too weak for what we do. We use a theatrical blank, which we own our own blank manufacturing company, so we can control the quality of what goes into our firearms. We can govern the amount of flash that's seen on camera and so on. And so just as much technology and research and R&D goes into our blank manufacturing as does the blanking of the guns themselves. And so that's why you see the difference between, you know, what you're using for training in the military and what we do on camera. The other aspect of it is, when you're using the blanks in the military, it probably is for training nowadays, because a lot of people don't use rifle grenades anymore. And so if you have a malfunction, that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be training to clear a malfunction so that when you get into battle and you have a live round malfunction the gun, you know what your immediate drills are to do to clear that malfunction.
So how about that country? Speaking of training with blanks, how about that country? I guess that they were so poor and with the ammo shortage that they said when they were shooting their guns, they were going bang to imitate the sound of the gun. I think it was an Asian country, if I'm not mistaken, but I can't remember which country it was. But yeah, they were putting everybody out there and they were going bang.
Yeah, it's it's a weird scenario. Again, you don't quite get the reality just by watching a movie or playing a video game. People who are in the military might agree with me here, but like, you do a lot of dry fire drills before you get to fire live in the military. You get a lot of fire and movement where you're running around doing dry firing, and you get trained. For instance, when I was in the IDF, we used to train and do drills and bring up your firearm and go esh esh, which means fire fire, and you did that endlessly before you were allowed to actually load a live round into your weapon and go out on the range and try it, in a very fire and movement kind of scenario. And then, you drill and you train so much that the first time you're in a real firefight, you don't think about it, but you're pulling up your gun and you might realize that you're actually going fire, fire, the first time, because it's just drilled into you and everything. So you never know. You see a lot of weird stuff online and people make jokes about other countries and stuff like that, but you never know exactly why they were doing something or how it was coming about. So it's okay to laugh, but I would do some research first.
Yeah, it is pretty funny. So now back to the show and experimenting with things. So that has got to be, for me, it's really fun to experiment with things. Yep. Like I seen a video online and I actually ended up making a video out of it. It was a police chase that happened out in Las Vegas, and the cop actually wound up shooting through his windshield to stop the perpetrators. I guess they had went to a car wash and shot some guy dead at the car wash, and then they were on a high-speed chase for quite some time, and they were actually shooting at the police officers for quite a while before the police officers finally decided to return fire. So I actually, because I work in the automotive industry, I can get a hold of windshields pretty easily. I mean, yes, they got cracks in them because they're damaged already, but you can still get the gist of it. So I built a little thing where I put the windshield up and I sat down in a chair and, shot through the windshield, and I set up a paper target silhouette to see how accurate it was at about the same distance the officer was shooting from the vehicle. And it actually worked out pretty well. And the bullet was actually going right where I was aiming it. So, I obviously didn't have the factor of hitting bumps and trying to steer and everything at the same time, but just to test kind of the theory of, can you shoot accurately through your windshield,
Yeah. And you've kind of asked the question and you've answered your own question in what you just said. Very hard to predict what happens once a bullet hits another object, much less goes through it. The idea of having to shoot through a windshield probably means that things have already gone very wrong. Right. And you're doing this as not because I think it's a good idea, but it's the only choice I have, So to do a test like you did, there was much more of a static test. It's nice and comforting to know I can see some results and maybe I have an idea of what this might be capable of. But when you throw in the bouncing cars, the speed, wind blowing back and forth, stuff like that, it gets very, very different. And I always, compare it to the guy that goes, "Oh, come on, let's go shooting." And I go, "Oh, okay, you want to go shooting? I'll go shooting with you." Well, I'm used to shooting, really shooting, running out there with a gun, dropping down onto the ground, doing a combat role and stuff like that. And then you get with your friend to the range and he thinks shooting is sitting behind a bench with a sandbag and a spotting scope. And true, that's a different type of shooting. But that's kind of like comparing your static test to what, would actually happen in the real world if you had to shoot through windshield. Great to know both options. Comforting to know that the bullet will make it through. But I think that those are really kind of Hail Mary kind of shots. You've gotten to a point where you have no other choice other than to do this. And we hope that it comes out well.
Right. Well, you can see even in the video, the police officer, he switches to his left hand as he's driving and he puts his arm out the window. But then you get the feeling he's like, well, maybe that's not my best option. So he brings it back in again and he's still chasing and he's like doing this a couple times before he decides to take the plunge and actually, pull the trigger. So, and I think really he was better off shooting with being a right-handed person, shooting with his right hand than his left hand, especially hanging it out the window, because at that point you don't know what's going to happen, and he's not really able to see where he's aiming his gun at that point either, because you got the pillar in the way and the gun's outside. There's no aiming at that point. So I think he was better off, putting it in front of him and aiming.
I agree. I do have to say, and I'm not saying that you're Monday morning quarterbacking, but for all those people out there that do and dissect videos and, oh, he should have done this and he should have done that. It's like, I don't care what you think you've done or where you think you've been until you're in that situation and someone's possibly actually shooting back at you. You have no idea what you're going to do or how you're going to do it or what the best thing to do at that time is. Right. And so I think people learn from watching these videos. I know military and law enforcement, we always analyze stuff to get lessons learned and everything. But at the same time, that's the way you have to approach it. You can't automatically approach it as, well, I've been to, 5 classes of the tactical school wherever, and I would have done it differently. You don't know that. You've never been shot at. You've never had to shoot a gun while you were trying to drive a car and not hit a pedestrian and not get yourself killed and all that. So I always take some of those comments with just a little bit of a grain of salt. But they're definitely interesting though when they happen and you see that, wow, he took the chance, he took that shot and it ended up well, gives you a little bit of confidence in your equipment for sure.
Definitely. And so some of the things you guys have experimented with on the show, I thought was pretty interesting when you brought out the dynamite to see if you could actually make dynamite explode. Yeah, that was pretty cool. I was like, wow, that actually worked. It was kind of like Tannerite,
Yeah, and as you guys could see, or those of you, if you haven't seen the show, the newer modern dynamite was very difficult to ignite. No matter what you shot at it, it doesn't really want to go. But the older original formulation, the dynamite Nobel came up with for dynamite, that's why they call it that. The idea of, Clint Eastwood in, shooting a bundle of dynamite hanging from a trestle bridge and blowing it up, in fact, could have happened. It could have worked, Nowadays, of course, we're much more safety minded and dynamite's used for all kinds of different mining purposes. And so they try to build in safety into it to where it won't go off from an impact, be it from a bullet or possibly dropping it, So there's a lot of other factors that are built in there. But that was an interesting one. The windshield was definitely an interesting one. We've done a couple of other interesting ones, like we did a takeoff of the Star Trek episode where Captain Kirk creates gunpowder by finding the raw elements. It was very interesting to see what happened there. And again, I want to stress that we don't pre-test this. We don't go out and try to find a way to make it look cool. We get all the ingredients there. We know what we're going to do, and we do it right in front of camera. So we've had some very interesting ones. We did the Underworld, where she spins in a circle and shoots the floor out, and that was very interesting.
What was that big gun you guys used at the end, and it still didn't cut through the floor?
So we wound up using an M240D gun, which is the kind of thing you would find mounted either on the turret of an armored vehicle or hanging out of a helicopter. And again, to stress the fact of that we didn't cheat anything, the floor we bought in a real construction guy to build a real floor. So the supports were every 12 inches, which is what the building code calls for. All the supports and the joists and everything, it was all there. And so it was and in fact, we managed to shoot through the floor part, but it was the supports and everything that didn't give way. And again, that's another example of, we do this for real. Me personally, I'll give you a little behind the scenes thing. I was really bummed that one didn't work the way we wanted it to work, because Terry, was in a harness, and the goal was that if we shot through the floor, would fall away, he'd be harnessed, just in there, gag. The show was, I was going to go like, okay, see you later. And I walked away, and he's like, hey, you're not going to leave me hanging, are you? So, again, we have stuff, sometimes we prepare for both options, but only one of them is what actually winds up happening. So
the floor joists held up very well. I've seen the actual flooring itself, though, man. You guys, it did cut through that like a saw, I tell you. I mean, but you guys shot a lot of bullets into that floor.
We did, and I don't remember it right now, but we calculated it out that you would have needed, I want to say we calculated out that you would have needed 14,000 rounds, each overlapping the other, to completely cut through. So had the supports not been there, or not as many, I think that even the damage that we did, even though every bullet didn't overlap, I think the weight of him standing there probably eventually would have broken through the floor and everything. But at one point we were like, okay, well, maybe we should shoot at one spot a little longer before we move on to the next. And the idea was, well, no, we can't do that, because in the movie she just keeps spinning, right? Dervish kind of thing. And so we need him to actually do what she did in the movie, and it will either work or it will not work. End result is, Terry tried his best with, I think we did 3 different weapons. We did some handguns, then we did some 9mm submachine guns, and then we stepped it up to the D guns. But he just wasn't enough of a werewolf to actually make it happen correctly. Me personally, I think it was the hair. He didn't have the hair for it. So
he definitely made a better vampire than a lichen.
Yes, absolutely. And surprisingly enough, the leather pants and jacket were his own.
Really?
That was very disturbing that it was like, oh yeah, you don't have to worry about wardrobe. I've got my own. I'm like, Terry.
I mean, he did say that he thought he looked pretty good in that outfit. So
yes. Kate Beckinsale did not have anything on Terry at that particular point. So.
That's right. Well, the other thing goes too. We're talking about the floor, but the scene where you were shooting the rope for the noose.
Yes.
I kind of had some thoughts during that whole episode, because he was hitting that thing and the rope was splitting. I mean, so yes, altogether braided 100%. It's definitely got a lot of more tensile strength to be able to hold. But once you fray that and you're holding by less strands, I mean, if it actually had the weight of a human body on it, I think it might have let go.
So we, of course, debated that. There's actually 2 shots in the film where he severs the rope. One much earlier in the film where he uses an 1866 lever action, presumably shooting either a 44-40 or a 45 Colt, and then later on at the end where he uses the Sharps, rifle. Think about it this way, and I think we even talked about this on the episode. If you were shooting a 45 caliber round, 0.45 of an inch, at a rope that was 3/4 of an inch in diameter, which is 0.750 of an inch, you could have literally hit it dead center, and there might still be enough of the rope on either side to not fray. We did have a bit of a dummy, like a stunt dummy structured up with the rope around him. It wasn't quite as heavy as we would have liked it. But yes, I agree. At a certain point, depending upon how many times you hit it, in combination with the weight of the dummy, it may have eventually frayed the rope and gone. I mean, it as they say, if you throw enough stuff at the wall, sooner or later, something's going to stick. The thing is, of course, that in the movie, it's Clint Eastwood, and he manages to do it with a single shot. And so the test is really not if you can hit the rope and it'll fray later on. It's can you cut the guy down with one shot of hitting the rope? Yeah.
I thought that was really cool how the special effects guy made it the rope with the little piece of explosive in there, so it gives that effect of cutting the rope. That was pretty interesting. I never knew how they did that, and that was a little bit of education for me there.
So that's one of the things whenever we do these programs or presentations that Terry likes to point out all the time is we have the fun of trying to duplicate something, but we also have the fun of kind of like being the magician that's telling the secrets, because we're able to tell the public how it was done in the movie. And that's specifically helpful when the test doesn't go well. Like if we try as hard as we can and we realize, you know what, in the real world, this just isn't going to work. Well, that leaves us with the question of, well, then how did they do it when they made the TV show or the movie? And so we get the fun of being able to show the movie magic as well. And one thing, me and Terry working together on this, you really have to understand how much of a collaborative effort this is. You only see me and Terry on screen, but the writer, the special effects guy, the director, the camera people, all the construction people, they all lend like 90% of the work for me and Terry to be standing there showing off 10% of the work that you wind up seeing on camera. While it's still very technical and it's still very stressful and it's still very dangerous, me and Terry being able to work together, we have a mutual understanding. Terry is the goofball in the show, but he's a very serious guy. And he's got a lot of experience both with weaponry and explosives and things like that. And when I come up, because in the show, I'm an in front of the camera host, but I'm also the behind the scenes armorer, the main safety officer, and all that. So I got a lot of other stuff going on. And me and Terry, we always have a sidebar just before the cameras roll. We step aside, we both go through what we need to have happen, make sure we're both comfortable with it. And, as an armorer, for me to be able to give someone, let's say an M60 belt-fed machine gun, because we're doing a Rambo episode, for me to be able to hand it off to them, this is no longer blanks. We're shooting for real. And knowing that Terry is an experienced former special forces guy, knowing that he has the understanding of all the parameters and all that, that helps me do my job better as well. And I think that's part of what has created the kind of really cool chemistry, the banter that goes back and forth between the two of us on camera.
Yeah, I mean, him having been a sniper and, all the training he's been through, I'm sure that definitely helps a lot, because he's very familiar, like I said, with those weapons and the firearms and all that. So yeah, that definitely works out great. Uh, the other episode I liked a lot, and I got a good laugh out of it, was the one where the Predator one with the minigun.
Oh, yeah,
The
the
jungle.
Predator one.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a challenge.
Yes.
That was a challenge, yeah.
And I seen like I get the production that went into that because you guys built the little jungle and everything, and I enjoyed watching and the explanation you gave where you laid the bullets out, showing them with the minigun because it's shooting so many more bullets that it's going to be a little more dense or whatever. But having them shoot it with the blanks, just like the guy did in the movie. I don't know how he was able to control it.
Well, I mean, it was Jesse Ventura, right? I mean, all kidding aside, I mean, Jesse's a big guy and he's
big guy.
He's buff. They didn't pick the little guy on the team to be carrying that weapon system. Not only do you have the firearm itself, but there was all the apparatus, in the backpack and everything. Right. So very, very challenging to do shoots like that. We later did the same kind of thing on the movie Predators. We used the backpack minigun in Captain America Winter Soldier. So yeah, I've had quite a bit of an experience with those rotary barrel weapon systems, and it's a big challenge.
Yeah, I mean, because if that was a live rounds, just the force of shooting that thing, I mean, there's no way somebody could just stand there and hold it.
Yeah. You could do a very, very, very short burst, like a couple of rounds, but right. when that gun spins up and you've got a continuous belt of ammo going through, the firing system creates like 294 or 296, I can't remember, 296 foot-pounds of rearward thrust. That means that if the rule of equal and opposite action and reaction is true, that means that would knock a 294-pound guy on his butt if he was trying to stand there shooting that for real. So clearly what's done in the movie with blanks is a little bit different than what is able to be done in the real world. But the fact that we're able to create that illusion, because that's what we're doing as armorers, we're creating the illusion of gunfire and making the audience believe that it's possible. It just means that we've done our job very well.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool because even and especially for back then, they pulled it off really well in that movie because he mowed down all that, vegetation and everything in the jungle there with that gun. So, I mean, I'm sure they had those little explosives rigged up to all the plants and everything to help make that happen. So I'm sure that was quite a production to get that all set up.
Yeah. I mean, one of the positions on the film crew is called the greens man. And their job is, all the vegetation and stuff. If there's a garden scene, if there's a jungle scene, maybe you're in a forest and, the Last of the Mohicans and Hawkeye is tracking someone through the forest and he sees a broken snapped twig. Every single time you go and do take 2, take 3, take 4, you need a new twig getting snapped. And so the greens department, will have, men and women whose job it is to create that set and that illusion. That's why, going back to my mosaic analogy, it's everybody doing their little piece together that comes together in the hands of the editor to create this beautiful thing that we call a movie. And I think that's cool.
Right. And I know the amount of production it probably goes into to make those shows that you're making too, because you see all the camera guys out there, and then like you guys are setting up the barricades, for safety and all that. I'm sure all that takes some time, and the episodes are like they're 30 minutes, but I'm sure it's not a full 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, people think of it as a half hour or 30-minute show. It's actually a 22-minute show with commercials. But with that 22 minutes, that's also the intro and the outro and the credits. So we're dealing with like between 17 and 19 minutes of actual screen time. And that will take weeks and weeks and weeks, if not months and months, to actually create,
right,
excuse me, that show. And I think it's a credit to Tim, Dan, and John as the creators of the show that 17 minutes has created such a response from the viewing public, because we love hearing from the fans, and the stuff we hear from them is just amazing, that they've really taken the show under their wing and it's made such an impact. And for me personally, the most wonderful thing I've heard from multiple people is that it becomes family time to watch the show. So fathers are sitting there with their sons, husbands and wives are sitting there with their daughters, and even people that aren't firearms enthusiasts. They might just be movie enthusiasts, or maybe they're just, they're just educated, normal, everyday people who find stuff interesting like this, get behind our show. That just blows me away. It just absolutely, exceeds anything that I ever thought. I think I had mentioned to you before we started the podcast that I only agreed to get into the show because I wanted to kind of shine a spotlight on all the hard work and labor that goes into shows like this behind the camera that most people don't even know about. And to hear this kind of response and everything, it just blows me away.
Yeah, like I said, I watched all the episodes. I know you said you just finished season 4.
Hopefully the 5. The war is not spotted. Pandemic, of course, it makes travel and logistics and filming very, very difficult. We're just now starting to see an uptick in production again, and hopefully the whole industry will rebound here sooner rather than later. But I don't know whether we'll have a season 5 or not. By all means, if you enjoy the show, you can write into Outdoor Channel. There is a little tab where you can send in remarks and say, hey, I like this show, I want to see more episodes, and stuff like that. We've gotten a huge response worldwide ever since we went on to Netflix and Amazon Prime. And I think we're also available to watch on Hulu. It's just been a huge response. I think it's a good show. It's fun, it's entertaining, educational in a way, and again, no cheating. We do it all for real.
And there's still a lot more movies you guys got to cover. So
we got so many ideas. We've got so many ideas that we would like to do that we think would just be absolutely phenomenal. And of course, it's all a matter of time and money as to whether we can fit everything into 17 to 19 minutes, and so on. So all we can hope for is a good response, and hopefully the network likes what they're seeing, which from everything we've heard, they have. And only time will tell. If when we did the pilot, I never thought there would be an entire season. When we were finished with season 1, I never really thought there'd be a season 2. And each season we've done, we've actually raised the bar and the production values. It's like you watch season 4 and you go, wow, that's a real show. That looks, it's not only interesting, but it's also very presentable. It's a very, very nice show. And I would have to say that to Jim Libertor's credit, the guy who runs the network, I think he saw the value in the show, and it's to his credit that the network and him kind of gave us the free leash. Cronky Sports, that owns the whole shebang, they've kind of let us run the show the way we want it to be. And as Dan Ram, our writer, always says, all we can do is try to make a show that we ourselves would want to watch.
Right.
And then hopefully the other people out there will want to watch it too. And he's proven right.
Right. That range that you guys use, is that owned by the studio or owned by ISS? It's a big range. It's beautiful. I like it.
I get that question a lot when they talk about that range. We've probably filmed on a dozen different ranges.
Yeah.
The majority of some of the stuff we've done, especially the longer shots that you're thinking of, like the shooting the noose rope out and everything, we have through other jobs that I do and other elements of our profession, I have very good contacts with Gunsight Academy, Jeff Cooper's, shooting academy, and a lot of that was filmed out there. Right. But yeah, the background, the scenery, all that, has to look right for the show, the overall look of the show. And so when we decide what tests we're going to do, we have to decide, like, this test will look good with a background out at Gunsight. This test will look good with a background somewhere else, and so on. So, remember, we're coming up with, for every 100 ideas we have, we film 8 of them. Right. So there's a lot of planning, a lot of logistics that goes into it. A lot of thought goes into each one of the shows of what it would look like. And hopefully we, keep the viewers happy.
Right. Well, the one range I was talking about, I seen it in a few of them, was the one, I believe it was the same one where you did the James Bond car gun video.
So that was a private one. Wow, I almost forgot about that. The James Bond car, that was an amazing test. We, duplicated the James Bond car by bolting 2 machine guns onto the hood and having to aim by driving. And we did a really good explanation, if I do say so myself, in the episode of what converging fields of fire are and how you have to zero it to a certain point. And we zeroed that for about 30 to 35 yards. And of course, we were firing from a lot further away and a lot closer. And I was impressed by the accuracy and everything that we got out of that. It was, and I got to admit, it was fun. Terry was driving the car, and I was in there with them. It's like, oh, you missed one, and he's swerving. And of course, as an armorer, the challenges of having to build a 360-degree shootable range, but that we could also film at.
Right.
Technically was a very challenging one. That was a real exciting day. And Andre and his special effects crew, the mounting system that they helped us build to lock it onto the car and everything was just pretty fun. I have to admit, I do walk away with a certain amount of professional satisfaction when it's all over, and being able to say, like, that was pretty cool, and we did it. In fact, my most satisfying one, which you probably didn't see, because I think it was you've told me you only saw season 1 and 2, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Did you see the Shadow episode that we did? I think that was in season 3, but there was a scene in the movie where the good guy and the bad guy both pull out a gun, the same gun, and they aim it at each other and they shoot, and the bullets hit in midair.
Right.
And we were actually able to duplicate that. We did it on our third attempt. The first attempt we missed by about an inch. Second attempt, one of the guns failed to fire, and the third attempt, you could see it in slow motion. They come in and they kind of hit at a slight angle, and they just explode. In fact, I have a series of frames in a frame on my wall, so you can see the bullets coming in closer and closer and closer, and it's 3 frames, and then you can finally see the bullet impact and it just kind of exploding. That was pretty satisfying.
Right. I bet that's where that slow motion.
It was incredible.
Awesome. Yeah, it's got to be incredible.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Now I really need to find the rest of the season so I can finish watching the episode.
Yeah, they're amazing. I mean, everyone from, again, Tim Kremen, who helped originate the show, through Dan, the writer, and John Carter, the director, and Brooke, who runs our cameras, and Felipe, our sound guy, and Molly, who does some amazing prosthetic makeup for some of the gag scenes that we do, and Pompeo, who's become another one of kind of like the kind of a co-host who's a foil for Terry. And I mean,
well, they did it in Green Hornet too.
I'm sorry?
I said they did it in Green Hornet too.
Yeah, exactly. It's just everyone's very, very proud of what we've been able to do, and it's just so much fun.
So one more question before we go, because we're a little over the 2-hour mark. But the episode where y'all did the samurai sword mimicking the Ryan Reynolds scene in X-Men, and they show Terry come into the martial arts dojo, and you're in there slicing it up, and I was like, oh my god, it's Larry. But until you turn around, I could tell, but should making it look like it's not you or whatever. But are you really a samurai?
I do practice several different martial arts. The main one that I practice is called Iai, or Iaido, which is the art of the Japanese samurai sword. And it's not kendo. Our dojo, we play around a little bit with kendo as well, but kendo is just the wood staves that you're whacking at each other with. Iaido is a live blade, and we practice cutting. It's called tameshigiri. So yes, I am a black belt in Iaido, which was part of, it was funny because we talk about, like, when we're filming one episode, we're already planning the next episode and everything. And sometimes there's tests that Dan comes up with, and he's like, yeah, we wanted to do this, but of course there's no way we'll ever be able to do that. So we just gave that one up. And I go, excuse me, why can't we do that? And he's like, well, how would we ever be able to do it? It's like, I know exactly how to be able to do that. And so there's all these different things, and they kind of comment on it throughout the seasons, where Terry just winds up asking me something, or he finds me doing something, and he goes like, I didn't know you could do that. And I'm like, well, you never asked, so that's been kind of a tagline and kind of fun. And if you've seen it, you should be able to go on YouTube during the COVID lockdown when everybody was shuttering in place. We did 5 or 6 episodes that we called Hollywood Weapons on Lockdown. And they were little, like, 10-minute episodes that we did over Zoom. Okay. Terry, of course, being on the East Coast and me being on the West Coast. And so you see stuff. We did some funny gags, like, I like playing pool. So I have a pool table in my house. So he calls me on the phone, and when I hit the phone on, there I am at the table playing pool. I like to paint miniatures, military miniatures. So it shows me, and of course he always makes fun of me for stuff like that. But it's all in good fun, and we do enjoy it. And from what we've heard, the audience enjoys it as well.
Yeah, I got a kick out of all the little skits you guys did. Terry's definitely, I think since the beginning, he's stepping up his acting a little bit for his little skits that he does. He's doing a good job, man. And I think you guys are both doing an excellent job on that show.
Oh, thank you.
And I know, me personally, I want to see more. So I will drop a line over
go to Outdoor Channel, Hollywood Weapons. There's a tab, I think they call it feedback or comments or something like that. Anyone else who's watching, we'd love it if you wrote in too, because that's how shows stay alive. And if we do a 5th season, we of course want to hear from you then as well, because about 90% of all the tests we've done so far have come from viewer feedback, where you guys make the suggestions and then we do the test. And Dan actually came up with a great little hook for the show, where in season 3 and 4, if your test suggestion gets picked and we do an episode about it, you get a free Hollywood Weapons t-shirt or ball cap. So that's another little cool feature that we like to do, because we like to involve the viewing public as much as possible.
Right. Cool. All right, everybody. Like I said, we ran a little bit over 2 hours, but it's been an interesting conversation with a very interesting man. If y'all like movies and you want to see how the things are done or see if they can really work in real life, go check out Hollywood Weapons. You won't regret it. It is a fantastic show, very entertaining, and I've learned a little bit just from watching it, and I've also come up with some ideas from watching the show as well. So, is there any other outlets where people can find you?
Again, when you watch your major motion pictures, read the credits, because you might go, oh, look, Larry was the armorer on that. Sometimes we get credit for the work, sometimes not. We just finished filming, like I said, season 10 of Gun Stories with Joe Montana, and they're nice enough to feature me as an interview guy. So I do the armor work behind the scenes, but then when we talk about the weapons, you might see me pop up there, as well as on some of the other shows, Shooting Gallery and stuff, all the Outdoor Channel things. There's different podcasts and little video clips. I just recently did a wonderful discussion with the Royal Armories in the UK. Very privileged to have my friend Jonathan Ferguson being one of the curators there. And since they're shut down for COVID, they've been trying to do a lot of Zoom talks and stuff like that. So you can find that on YouTube. Just go on Royal Armories, look up Larry Zanoff, and you'll find that. So yeah, we're out there, and hopefully you guys like what we're doing, and tune in, and hopefully there'll be more.
One of the other things I thought of while watching you guys on that show was I would love to spend a day with you guys out there just blowing some stuff up.
Yeah, we get that a lot, and we've tried to involve the viewing public as much as we could. At one point, there was a suggestion, maybe if you won some kind of prize, the prize would be to come out on while we're filming. Do that, liability insurance, stuff like that, right. Travel and logistics. You can't. A television production or a film production is like a snowball rolling downhill. It's very difficult to stop the momentum. So could you imagine if I invited you out to set and you were going to win a prize, and you're in the airport in Wisconsin and a storm causes you to miss your plane? I can't stop the filming of the episode just so that you can be there to see it. So it's very difficult, but we are working on different ideas and different things like that. So we'll see what happens in the future.
For me, it's not so much wanting to be on the set or anything. It just more or less.
You just like blowing stuff up, don't you?
Right. I mean, I do it a lot here. I got a friend who owns a farm, and we go and blow stuff up all the time over there. So, I mean, who doesn't love a good explosion?
Did you ever see the movie G.I. Jane?
Nope, I have not. There was a big portion of my life where I didn't watch movies for a long time.
Well, don't make up for that now. There's a good line in G.I. Jane with Demi Moore where she says something about just having the fun of blowing stuff up. And go watch the movie, and then private message me and tell me what part it is, just so I know you really watched it.
There you go. Well, all right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Larry, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been absolutely bananas.
There you go. We always like to have bananas around here.
There you go.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
All right, just hang on right there for a minute.